Hello, I'm here today to talk about how you can provide support to your employees or your colleagues or those that you manage in the workplace. My name is Elizabeth Donnell, and I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I am the founder of a group practice, East Bay Center for Anxiety, here in Alameda, California. And I hope that you find this webinar helpful. So, when I was putting this together, and, when I'm talking to you as the manager or the employee or the employer, that I wasn't quite sure where to start. And so what I'm tried to do today, and hopefully I've succeeded, is to give you a platform that is a combination of my own experience from being a small business owner myself, and then also what I do, which is psychology, and putting those two together. And where I decided to start here is to define what support is. So I looked it up, and in the context, I think, as far as supporting your employees or your staff, in a way that allows them to have an emotional well-being and mental health practice, or to have healthy mental health. And how does one do that? So to support this would be to provide a basis for the existence or the subsistence of, or to promote the interests or the cause of, to uphold or defend as valid and right, and to uphold or serve as a foundation or a prop. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you what I've put together here in regards to what I'm speaking about, and how do you develop a work culture in an environment that provides a basis for the existence or subsistence of emotional well-being and mental health, promotes the interests of emotional well-being and mental health, to uphold self-care as valid in the work culture, and your work culture and environment serves as a foundation for emotional well-being and mental health. So provide, promote, uphold, and serve as a foundation. That is what I mean here by support. And I am talking specifically about the mental health and the emotional well-being of your staff or your employees, or all of those in your workplace, including yourself. So I invite you to take a moment, and you can do it now. You can stop this webinar, or you can do it afterwards, or maybe perhaps you already do this already. But to kind of sit down and reflect, and maybe journal about it, or type it on a Word doc, or however you do, of what is your current work or business culture? And how has it changed in these challenging times? And take a moment to think through that, right? Because it certainly has changed. In any challenge, a work culture or a business will change based off of what it provides to the community and what the business is and the challenge. And looking at what are the qualities that you want to support and how to help support. What are the qualities that enhance or help the emotional well-being and mental health of your employees? And what are the qualities do you want to shift? And if there's qualities you want to shift because they're not supporting or they're counter to the emotional well-being of your work culture, then make a plan and make it in small steps so that you can visit it on a regular basis and take care and tend to these small steps that will help develop and or enhance or sustain the emotional well-being and mental health of your employees, especially during challenging times. And so how to identify what's healthy or unhealthy? I'm going to provide for you something that I worked with in the last 3 webinars about what are unhealthy stress and what would this look like in the work culture. And then you ask yourself, do any of these appear in your work culture? So overwhelm. Is there even when you walk into the space, is there a sense of overwhelm, of hurriedness? Anxious people make people anxious. So is there an elevated anxiety, and does that seem to make everybody kind of anxious? What is that level of calm different than overwhelm in your workspace, in the business culture? Is it fueled? Do people individually seem overwhelmed and always talking about how much they have to do and how they can't get things done? Which then can cause ruminating. Now, people do, individual ruminating, which I explained in earlier podcast, not podcasts, in the earlier webinars. But the thing you're looking for in the workplace is co-ruminating. So how are your staff and employees, and how are the people in the business coming together to connect? Are they sitting down and complaining a lot? Are they sitting down and venting to each other and going, oh yeah, that happened to me. Yeah, last night I was here till 7 o'clock, and the night before I was here until 9, and I'm just always here and I'm always late. And yeah, so me too, we're just always here because there's just so much work to do and we just have to stay late all the time. And yeah, my spouse was complaining. Is there that sense of conversation going on, which I would call is kind of complaining, blaming, and churning, except they're churning out loud to each other. And maybe there's a sense that they're trying to solve a problem, but actually there is no solution that comes from that conversation. What comes from that conversation is a sense of a connection, but it's not a healthy connection because it just keeps people spinning and doesn't enable them to move from a worry standpoint and kind of venting together into a problem solving or solution based platform. And in that co-ruminating, then people tend to lose focus and they speak in broad general terms like, yeah, this always happens. And can you believe it? How many nights have we been here so late? Or I had to come in so early yesterday. And so it gives a really big global view, right? When they're co-ruminating and feeling overwhelmed. And then is there, thought process, language that's going on for being catastrophic and catastrophizing the situation. A lot of what ifs, or why bother? Why bother? Because this delivery is going to be late anyways, and it's never going to get to the customer. So why should we bother to even try and move this out faster? Because there's so many obstacles with COVID anyways, so it really doesn't matter. That's an example. And so if you're hearing these kinds of conversations or attitudes in the culture, then there's a chance there's some unhealthy stress in your workplace. And are people internally isolating? And what I mean by that is not that they're not talking to each other or engaged, but do they seem a bit distracted, kind of absorbed in themselves? When you talk to them or when they're talking to each other, they're kind of going through the motions, but they're not really connecting. They're not taking the time to ask specific questions or more detailed questions. They're more general questions and kind of head nods and, okay, I'll do that, I'll do this. And then they may forget and not be as focused because that they're internally isolating because there's so much stress going on and so many thoughts going on in the back of their head that it's sucking them in and disconnecting from the workplace and the work culture, which then typically manifests as irritability and insomnia. I didn't put insomnia down there, but that's the external manifestation is irritability. So do you see, is your staff is typically people who didn't used to are going from 0 to 60 now, or kind of harsh with each other or snippy at each other. And there just seems to be a general tone of kind of grumpiness or irritability. That's a sign there's unhealthy amounts of stress going on in your workplace and your work culture. So what do you do with this if you start detecting this? Well, one of the best and most significant things you can do as a boss or a manager or an overseer of the business is to take the time to check in, connect. You want to listen first. Try not to, it's hard, I know, but don't walk in with a bunch of solutions and ideas and put them down on the table and then just walk away, right? Especially in these challenging times, people aren't necessarily looking for advice on how to solve the problems in the business culture. They just want somebody to listen. Partially because we're not talking to people as much as we were pre-COVID times, but also it is just part of human nature that we want to be listened, we want to be heard, we want to be seen. And so listening first on what they have to say, whether they're complaining, whether they're complimenting, whether they're just telling you that they had to deal with difficult customers today, whatever it is, listen first, have empathy. So really put yourself in their shoes and try and understand what it was like to be them that day or in that situation. And one of the things I think in the business world that works well, rather than feeling empathy, sure, you can say, wow, you must feel really angry today because you dealt with 4 difficult customers and you made sales. That's pretty spectacular. I'm really impressed. Now that's a very good communication. And thought empathy, though, is playing back and not parroting, but summarizing in your own words what you heard the person said. What did they say to you? That's thought empathy. And that can be very powerful and impactful in general. And I think in the workplace, it's a very useful kind of empathy to have. And validate. Yeah, I totally get why you're irritable after dealing with those 4 difficult customers in the last 2 hours. And you were solo here in the shop because I've had to, cut staff back. I mean, I really appreciate it and I get it. I'd be really angry also. So validating, summarize what they say, which I've just given you a couple examples of that, and inquire, like, yeah, and so I'm really hoping you're going to have time to rest tonight. Is that true? How are things going at home, by the way, anyways? Asking questions, having inquiry, having a genuine curiosity about your employees, about what's going on for them, can be very, very helpful and really solidify the connection that you're trying to make. Now, in that sense of when there's irritability, right? And after you make that connection, what you want to do is also acknowledge that there is a lot of stress going on, right? And so there's value in giving each other a pass. Give your colleagues and employees the benefit of the doubt. Don't take it personally. Take to heart that everyone you interact with is struggling in the workplace and in life. This is a difficult time. It really is. We're almost in this for a year now. And in ways that they're struggling in ways that you may not fully understand. So take that to heart. That's kind of the empathy component. Don't take it personally. And assume that everyone is acting from a good place, that they're all well intended. The fact that they showed up some days is probably a miracle in their minds because they left behind children who are trying to learn online and maybe a spouse that's frazzled who's also working at home and trying to manage the kids. And that enables them to practice forgiveness. If you assume that the person's coming from a good place, then you're more apt to forgive them for the irritability, for the acting out that they might do. And show patience and compassion towards yourself and others so that you can let it go and just move forward. I think that's really important right now. We don't want to be stuck in the muck holding on to things that keep us stuck, right? So showing patience and compassion towards yourself because you're dealing with very difficult situations, and also then towards others. It's both. You don't need to be completely self-sacrificing and only show compassion and patience towards your employees. And you don't want to be so self-absorbed that the only person you're showing compassion and kindness to and patience is yourself. It's that delicate balance, right? So in that connecting, then the next thing you want to consider and do is encourage an attitude of gratitude in your workplace, right? And so start or end, for example, staff meetings with one thing each person can feel grateful for, one thing they feel grateful about working in the business that they're working in, one thing they feel grateful for that happens when they go home, even during COVID times. Helping be a little specific at the end and giving them the focus that enables you to do this activity many times, and each time it feels a little different because you have a different focus on what you're asking them to name about being grateful. Facilitate a gratefulness challenge. I mean, this is the classic, and I'm still amazed at how well this works. When I work with people that are depressed, often I will have them commit to 30 days where they'll post on their social media feed one thing they're grateful for, right? Or to make a list of 3 to 5 things they're grateful for every day if they don't want to make it public, right? And you can do this in the workplace. You can have your employees, like if you have a Facebook page, I think it's a great business promotion. Everybody every day put one post up there of something that they're grateful for. You can have a challenge where maybe you just keep it written up on the whiteboard in the business if people are coming in, or that every day when you have Zoom meetings with people, have them put 3 things they're grateful for in the chat box. There's a variety of ways, but the goal is, the challenge is that you hone in on a certain amount of days. Now, I think 30 days totally shifts a person's thinking and well-being, and that could be really wonderful. But if that takes too much time, or you won't focus all the way through to the 30 days, then the best thing would be to do it for a shorter period of time, for like 3 days or 7 days. And make sure in this developing, and fostering this attitude of gratitude, if you will, in your workplace, is you want to show show appreciation to your staff by being specific with your feedback. So I really appreciate your sense of responsibility when you took on that extra project last week. That just helped us out so much. Thank you. So it's very useful. It's one thing to say, I appreciate you, or I really appreciate what you've done. And that is very useful, don't get me wrong. But to then get specific about a character quality that you really appreciate they have, and something specific they just did as a result of that character quality, that has more meaning and depth to it. Because one, it really says that you've been watching them, you're listening to them, you know them, right? You know them well enough to get that specific. And it also then lets them know what they can do to continue to be appreciated, right? And you want to remind your employees the importance of self-practice. So this goes back to, validating that self-care is absolutely necessary. And it's an easy thing, especially in stressful times, to get put offline or go by the wayside. People start getting into old behaviors that aren't as healthy. And so just openly acknowledge sometimes that in these circumstances, we're all going to be less productive, or there's times where we're going to be less productive, or there's times that we're not going to be producing anything at all, or really feeling like we're working, because these are challenging times, and that's the nature. Support taking breaks to exercise, give attention and time to their children and their loved ones, and check in once in a while and see, are they getting rest, and how are things going, right? And what's happening there. That's a very good thing to be doing. So the last thing is to role model. You want to role model practicing self-care. This is very, very important, because this is probably one of the best gifts you can give yourself and your staff, your employees, because they're looking to you, right? They're looking to you for support. And one way you can support them is to show how you're taking care of yourself. And so if you, have a lunch break and there's other people that are on that lunch break, and you can suggest, hey, let's all go for, a little walk. Anybody got time for a 10-minute walk? Right now, of course, social distancing is important, but definitely, or inviting them into conversations about, I've been having a really hard time sleeping. Transparency can be helpful in this. And I just discovered this app. Have you ever heard of it? Calm, or, Headspace, whatever. I've listened to their sleep meditations and I think I got a really good sleep last night. Have you ever tried one of those apps? And generate conversations and inquiry and curiosity about self-care and about their self-care and how they're doing with it. So it becomes a topic of conversation. Once again, it feeds into the culture of the workplace. And that so rather than them ruminating and complaining and venting, they're sharing thoughts and ideas and talking about how they can better take care of themselves, or the things that they do to do that. So let's take a moment to brainstorm and brainstorm actions and activities that you can implement that support that mental health. Give time to check in. Make sure that there's time that you're checking in with them, but also if they come to you and they close the door and they look stressed out, just take a moment to go, before we go solve this problem or do the next thing on this project, how are you doing? Is there anything you just want to download for a minute or anything? It's a really challenging time. Giving that invitation and making sure that you're making time to check in. And what you can do also, as part of the plan and making it into small steps, is think about, okay, well, every day I'm going to go by one employee, a different employee, and just check in and give them up to about 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes of my time to download if they're really stressed, right? And you can do that on a weekly basis. You can check in, make sure you check in with everybody daily. Set an intention or a goal that's obtainable, that helps you interact with your staff in a way that, once again, encourages and supports their emotional well-being and mental health. Remember to give each other a pass, as I said earlier. So know these are challenging times, and know that one of the predominant things, the signs of unhealthy stress, is irritability, and that people are probably going to be irritable at times. Don't take it personally. Just know that it's part of the times. As a matter of fact, ask them, you're sounding pretty irritable. Are you? What's happening for you? Giving them a time to download and diffuse. And as I said, encourage that attitude of gratitude. Do gratitude lists. Talk about it in staff meetings. Talk about once in a while what you're just feeling grateful for in the day. That can all be helpful. And keep the reminder of self-importance, of self-care going. Maybe you'll have little challenges in the office even. Like how many people this week meditated for 5 days? Or let's see next week how many people can keep up with their exercise program and not miss a day that they had originally decided to do. These are all little challenges that encourage that attitude and the ability of having good emotional well-being and mental health. Providing connection. I've stated numerous ways throughout this webinar, ways you could provide connection for your staff. You can do Zoom meetings, you can do social distancing, you can also connection in another way is provide resources and have resources on hand of hotlines and suicide prevention, and maybe even little pamphlets and tips and tricks on mental health and what to look for, the signs and the symptoms of depression or anxiety. Keeping out resources for things that can help their mental health in the community. That's also another way to provide connection. All right, so let's take a moment and review, and hopefully this supplies you with some, thoughts and ideas of how you might continue to support or to begin to support or change some things so that you can support the emotional well-being and mental health of your workplace. So check the pulse of your work and business culture, and have, especially during these times, perhaps have it on your calendar and check it regularly. So regularly could be, every 2 weeks or once a quarter or once a month. You decide, but check in on it regularly to see, is the culture of your business or workplace fit into the mission, to fit into the goals? Is it promoting emotional well-being and mental health? These are the questions you might ask yourself in that. And check for unhealthy stress patterns. How are your staff talking to each other? Do they seem to be complaining a lot and churning over the same complaint over and over again? Or are they reaching out, and are they taking their walks at lunch and talking about them, right? Or are they just kind of withdrawn, and even though they're interacting with each other, they seem rather robotic and kind of turned inward and in on themselves. And maybe sometimes the only time they talk to each other is when they're rather irritable. And you notice that the level of irritability has increased. These are all ways and signs, ways to check, and signs of unhealthy stress patterns that may be slowly chipping away at the work or business culture that you want to sustain. And so when you do that, then look at the strengths and vulnerabilities of the current work culture. What are the strengths and what are the vulnerabilities? I mean, one of my favorite statements when you're looking at change and trying to figure out what to do is to keep doing what's working and to change the rest. And so always hold on to what's working and then figure out plans in small steps of ways to change the rest. Give time to check in. That's, absolutely incredible. I gave ideas throughout the webinar about how you could schedule check-ins and how you can reach out to staff and employees, and just checking in about them and telling them little stories about yourself and your own self-care and what's going on for you can be tremendously valuable. Remembering that irritability is one of the most common ways that unhealthy stress patterns manifest in a person's behavior. And while they may be well-intended, they show up for work, they do a good job. And so give them a pass. Don't take it personally, right? Encourage gratitude. Remind staff, as I said earlier, the importance of self-care, role model it. Review activities and actions that will support a healthy work culture. So have a list of things that you want to implement, like during the quarter or during the month. And always have a list available and kind of check it off and see, okay, have we implemented the attitude of gratitude? Are we checking in at the beginning of staff meetings and having everyone say something they're grateful for? Are people taking lunch breaks and actually going for a walk, or turning off their Zoom camera and then coming back later? I recognize I've been giving probably more outdoor kind of examples than necessary during this time. So if you could translate it to, how could you do this on Zoom? How can you do this on the phone? What can you do to amplify your investment and your intention of investing into your staff or employees' emotional well-being? And provide that connection, not only providing that connection to each other by maybe having a Zoom party or gathering or a coffee or a lunch, but also providing a connection to you as you're the employer, right? And then the other thing as far as connection is provide ways they can connect to mental health resources and suicide prevention lines or crisis hotlines or things they want to talk to. Make sure those resources are not only available, but possibly out like on a desk or somewhere. They're easily accessible also. this all leads to emotional well-being and mental health for you and your staff. So I hope you found this useful. Once again, my name is Elizabeth Dondinell. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I'm the founder of the East Bay Center for Anxiety Relief here in Alameda, California. And if you like what I have to say, you can send me a note. You can give us a like on our YouTube channels. You can also contact me by phone or email or our website if you think that we might be able to be support and you're looking for some specific support. We might be the people that can help you. All right. So be well during these times. Take good care.